Good morning. I'm Mary Francis, and my slides are being run by Martha because I can only multitask so much. Our program, Luminos, is part of California's UC Open Press, which also includes Collabera, which is a large-scale open access journal. I'm not going to talk about Collabera today, but those of you who would like to know more about it, you have a wonderful resource here in this room in the second row on this side in the form of my colleague Dan Morgan. Next slide, please. We started these two programs about 18 months ago. Collabera is now open for submissions, and I understand we've got quite a robust little pipeline going already. The books program, Luminos, is a monograph program. We intended to focus this on scholarly monographs for our humanities and social sciences disciplines. We were assuming that Collabera would be a more science-oriented project. Books obviously take a little longer to get going, although I'm happy to say that we've got 12 titles committed, many more in the pipeline in contract discussions, and our first titles will be coming out this fall, fall 15. In a matter of days, we're going to have a sample title up, so to speak, an actual older title already published by us about 10 years ago that'll be used as a little bit of a demo, and I'll talk a little bit more about why we selected that one, because it plays to the strengths, I hope, of the program. If you get the next slide, please, Martha, thank you. A little look here at the website that we've developed to give you some information. This is a new way to think about something that's the core of what we do, and a lot of what Ross was just talking about, of course, we wanted to preserve, particularly since we are focusing on the humanities and the social sciences. It's overall small c conservative arena to be working in, and as Ross highlighted, for many of these people, the monograph, the credentialing that goes along with that, especially still in the North American arena, is very, very important. And so quite similar to Palgrave, we sought to preserve the essential components of the credentialing part of publishing a monograph. Curation and selection by the editors is exactly the same. You know, as one of the people who was editorial lead, and we talked about getting this ready and saying to the editors, don't try to use this as an expansion tool. Focus on the top quality stuff that you would have acquired anyway, no matter whether this program had been available or not. We put it through identical peer review, and similarly to what Palgrave has done, we don't to highlight open access during that. This is, as with Palgrave, an author's choice in conjunction with the editor they're working with, whether or not they want to do this. And we found that frequently some people do know at the beginning that they want an open access title. Some are trying to decide as they go through. So we try to keep that separate from all the selection processes, which also, of course, because we're a university press, include our faculty editorial board approval. And getting them involved has been really quite crucial. I'm going to talk a little bit about our funding model and how we want to see it as a kind of community thing. The faculty are our community, and so getting the faculty editorial board to be sort of ambassadors for this program has been really important to us. For those of you who don't know, I think we were able to take advantage of the scope of the University of California in a really good way. We're talking about 10 campuses. And so when you talk about our faculty group, you're getting a representation of 10 really, really top quality campuses right off the bat. And so that's helped us in terms of getting the word out to the community. We've also kept our copy editing processes and as much of our design templates the same as we could. We are known for top quality work in copy editing in particular. I got plenty of authors who say they come back to me because of my colleagues in our editing department. So we also sought to preserve that. Our technology partner, Ubiquity Press in London, gets the files for their work after we have gone through our normal copy editing processes, which coming after the selection, of course. Martha, if you could move to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new about the model, because that sort of stuff is what we sought to preserve from the older model. We needed a new model. I don't think I need to elaborate on why the market is such a challenge for scholarly monographs. One of the biggest things that we kept returning to as we were trying to plan this program is the desire to free our choices about what to publish from discussions of market size. We wanted to make those choices strictly in terms of merit, rather than can the market support this. So we were attracted to the open access model of getting costs covered up front and removing the barriers to access in the hope that we could amplify some of these fields that we're so involved in that don't always sell in the numbers that Ken Auletta's books do. We have, as Palgrave has done, focused on making all digital formats open access. We do sell print, paper only in our case, which is slightly different from Palgrave offering both cloth and paper, reasonably priced paperbacks between $34.95 and $39.95, and that, of course, may be adjusted in the future. But one of the things we wanted to also emphasize in drawing certain kinds of scholars to this is that we hope, although again my hope is shadowed by the IP challenges that Ross was mentioning, that scholars who could take advantage of multimodal capabilities, which our technology partner Ubiquity has worked with us very intensely on, will be attracted to this program. People who work in media studies, cinema studies, film, people who want to use mapping. We would like to be able to sort of draw people toward the open access digital edition because those capabilities will be fully embodied there. I mentioned our little sample title that's going to come out in a couple of days. It's an older book on the music of J.S. Bach from our music list. We, back in the day, had recordings made work for hire for a CD. Well, those will now be embedded in the open access edition so that you can simply listen as you read. That kind of thing we also saw as a potential benefit in the future. And really, this is about author choice. And as I mentioned, author choice is important. Authors do get to choose this program in conjunction with their editor, and that's part of our model as well. I would say that IP issue is going to be one that we're all going to have to watch pretty closely, though, because as Ross highlighted, you say to the author, you've got a CC BY license. Some of our authors have selected more restrictive licenses, by the way, although we encourage the CC BY. That's another aspect of choice that we do think of as important, but you have to really teach them the whole IP thing from the ground up in an entirely new way. Martha, next slide, please. Thank you. The other new thing is about the model for getting this paid for. Ours did start from assuming that we would have to push costs down as much as we could so that we start from a rational model. We're estimating, basing our estimates on $15,000 to cover costs for a baseline kind of a title, under 100,000 words, not too many illustrations. Of that, we're asking authors and their institutions to contribute $7,500, however they can. We then contribute, the press contributes, and we have a program where libraries become members, and they contribute, and their contributions go into a pool which we draw on title by title. We are assuming that there will be some very incremental print sale revenue, but it's quite modest what we're guessing. We're just, because print sales of these books in our normal program are so modest in some cases, 400 copies over 3 years. If we did anything even that was a fraction of that, that would seem quite robust. So we're not really going to rely on that very much. Of course, we'd be happy to see the print sales be robust. And it's been interesting to note where some people have seen more robust print sales out of these programs than they thought. Now, I mentioned that these are baseline costs. We are scaling that. If you have a more elaborate book with many, many illustrations or lots and lots of live AV files, or it's 200,000 words, we have all our production costs scaled so that then the author's contribution has to go up in increments of $500. Now, interestingly, one of the titles that I signed most recently, very elaborate, talking about video games and music. And according to the calculations that I worked on with the author, he will have to bring us $9,500. Now, interestingly, he's having very good luck with that. His institution's quite supportive of this. Their library has been very interested in open access, and so it does seem that for some places this is a possibility. Okay, the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about this library membership model. Now, here you see something that sort of zeroes in on that part of the funding model. We encourage libraries to become members and contribute a small fee each year. We put that into a pool, and then as you see, the dollars are drawn out per monograph to make sure that each monograph gets a little bit of coverage there. We did this for several reasons. First of all, we knew, and we hope to amplify our knowledge of libraries' interest in open access. Their sort of service ethic has often led powerful librarians at research institutions to want to support open access in any way they can. This is, we hope, an efficient model for them, and also an attractive one. We have found so far, knock wood, that some of the bigger libraries are very, very supportive indeed, and they feel that they are able to possibly give more than $1,000 a year towards supporting this program. So we're devising, and you can see this on our website, a support system that's sort of graded, kind of like when you're giving money to the ballet or the opera. If you give more, you get more. So in addition to things like MARC records and so on, you might get a special sale deal if you want to purchase books that are not in the program. If you have an author at your institution who wants to join the program, then they might get a discount on the fee that they have to bring, things like that, to make it attractive to join in. But again, as with authors, libraries opt in. This is an open access program. If you're a library with fewer resources, you'll still, of course, be able to get the books if you really want them. So, next slide, please, Martha. Thank you. Choice is key, and we've found that that really has helped us get people to buy in if they feel like they are participating in helping us extend these scholarly programs and being able to have a little bit of control over what they're able to do with us. And we are hoping, although, as I said, because the books are only just going to start to come out this fall, that we will see some of the trends that Ross has seen where this will amplify the scope of the work that we're disseminating, that we will see positive effects ultimately in terms of use. Whether that has negative effects on print sales, we think that might, happen if it's happened to others. But what we really, in the end, want the most is the widest possible dissemination of this material. And we want to make sure that, that by removing those barriers of access, that we are part of the solution to that. Thank you very much.
A question right there.
Yeah, John Morgan. I was wondering, you said that you're making the digital versions open access worldwide across all platforms. Was there any discussion about the possibility of, say, selling digital versions inexpensively, say, through Amazon or Apple?
You mean like an iTunes model, 99 cents for... We didn't, I don't recall discussing that particular model, but it did come up. We did a survey to prepare ourselves for this of people who we thought of as potential authors, potential funders. I didn't get to talk very much about funding. We found some interesting stuff about funding because we're not in that space where there's as many mandates. And a lot of people in responding to the survey said, well, you guys are such a great press and this is such great material. I'd pay an iTunes system kind of fee, $1, $2 for one of these. But in the end, we have been, I think, very persuaded by the notion that if you're going to go open access, you go all the way, or you go as far as the IP issues allow you to.
Yes.
Hi, you were carefully concentrated on humanities and social sciences. I'm curious if you have any monographs that you've dealt with that are in the physical sciences. And either way, if not, or if so, what kind of differences there may be to the funding model and other things in that area?
We do not. We are not anticipating very many. As I said, the sort of overall strategic direction was to focus on Collabera, and you're sitting right next to my colleague with all the useful information about Collabera, on the sciences. The science books that we are doing now, we hadn't focused so much on that, partly because we felt like we needed more of a solution for the humanities and social sciences. We had a lot of interested parties and clout in that arena. So not really. And as to the funding mandates, I'm glad you did bring that up, because I did want to see if I could find a moment to talk about that. We are, based in North America and on the West Coast, for that matter, and as focusing on the humanities and social sciences, it's simply not as mandate-rich, if that's a good term to use, arena, more so for the social sciences, obviously. Particularly, I'm thinking of our lists in criminology and sociology, where we are starting to see people getting these grants that have mandates attached with them, but for the humanities, it's still very nascent, and places like Mellon or the Sloan Foundation that are interested in supporting this stuff are thus far not putting down any firm mandates. But of course, we're all watching people like Ford and the Gates Foundation and so on, because they may, of course, do that in the future. I frankly don't know as much about the situation outside of the sciences, although I try to follow it. I'm sure that Ross or Dan could probably talk a little more about that. We're starting to get the program up and running, and we've talked to, it's sort of like a capital campaign. You talk to a bunch of people early, and you try to make sure that you can say, UCLA is very interested, UCSD is very interested, before you go out to other people. And so I don't have a whole lot of hard data about how many librarians have already signed up and what figures they're offering, although I know some of the secret PUDA about that. The real marketing push is coming on as people flip over their budget year and start to do their planning for this coming year. So we will see more of that. Geographical spread, good question. A lot of it started with talking, as I mentioned earlier, to the California system, which is very large. I mentioned the 10 campuses of the UC system, but then we got, Cal States and all that. Many of the big libraries who we approached first are, of course, in the places you would expect to find them, the Ivies, the near Ivies, the relatively wealthy state systems that have already got a pretty high profile of supporting open access initiatives like Michigan or Indiana. But I think that you will see a geographic spread, at least across the United States, that pretty much maps onto what we're all aware of in terms of size and relative wealth. Alison Muddett, who is our director, who Martha mentioned being at the FIE Soli conference in Berlin, has done a lot of the work on the UK side, and I think we're seeing there pretty similar spread in terms of how people break down. Russell Group institutions have a few more resources, and of course are showing that they do by expressing their interest. But geographic spread, that's interesting. I don't know too much about what we're doing at the moment outside the Anglo-American sphere, but I expect that we will be doing more as the program gets on its feet.
Last question.
You mentioned emphasizing the multimedia options in your OA program. Are you experimenting with that kind of thing with your traditional monograph program as well? And is there a reason
Well, this is sort of why they wanted me, I suspect, because one of the primary things that I deal with is our cinema and media studies and music lists. And so I have, been in the business since the early 90s, and I've, to use Ken Auletta's phrase, thrown about everything I can throw against the wall in those terms. I mean, we've had DVDs and books, we've had CDs, we've had stuff on websites. We've tried it all. And it's an interesting sort of conundrum, because all these scholars are very interested in having multimodal capabilities, and yet most of them, except the very, very youngest ones, have grown up in this both a restrictive IP climate, which is going to continue to be a problem, I fear, and a restrictive technological climate. And so they're not really used to being able to just say, hey, this could be possible. So we're having to educate them a little bit there, but also with the IP stuff, we could do a whole separate session on that. It is a real issue. It gets you into educating a whole range of different people. Fair use definitions start to come up again. But I felt, and I do feel, that this is an important arena for that kind of thing, if only because, as we all know, as much as NBC and Sony may want to protect this stuff, you can see this stuff. It's out there on the internet. There's no reason not to allow scholars to really engage with the object of their research in a rational way. But we have a lot of hurdles to clear, and I think a lot of probably interesting discussions ahead of us to really get to the point where everything is where we want it to be in terms of all the multimodal capabilities fulfilling their potential.
Thank you, Roz.
That's okay.
Roz had one.